This is Amy Chan from CakeDecoratingSchool.com, and if you like cake decorating, you're in the right place. Welcome to our Practice With Me series. In this video, we'll be doing the basic piping techniques set. Like all of our videos, it's broken down into chapters so you can skip ahead, rewind, and rewatch as desired. This basic piping technique set features 10 printable templates. They're meant to build on the skills you learned in your basic certificate course, but you can definitely follow along even if you haven't completed it. We are reinforcing, expanding, and building on those skills you already know while introducing some new ones. So you're going to practice skills you may have already learned with some new tips, do some new techniques with some tips you might already be familiar with, and we're just going to add some new ones all together. This should help you to build up your decorating skills and craft some new cake designs. If you're already a paid member of our school, you will find the practice sheets ready to print out. You just need to log into your account. If you're not and you want to help support our channel, you can purchase them separately through the link in the description. Or you can just follow along with us and practice on some parchment. And we appreciate you supporting our channel just by watching. To follow along with this video, you'll need the following bags and tips. We're going to be using 2 bags, one with a coupler and one without, and the following tips. We're going to start with a number 3, but we'll also be using a number 5, 12, 18, 21, 32, and 199, as well as a 104 with our bag that has the coupler. We'll be using a number 2D, so a closed star tip, with our bag that does not have the coupler. Number 86. We're using some American style buttercream to do this practice session, and you can use whatever color you like, including some leftovers you may have from projects. All of the tips that we're using in this set are from the Wilton 55-piece master tip set. It's a common one that a lot of people have, so I picked my choices from this one since they're all very popular tips that you may already have, and they all come in this single set. To get ready to pipe, you're going to need something to practice on. And we are using a little plexi sign holder, so it's a double-sided pieces of plexiglass that we can slip ours into. And I like using these for my demo videos just because it makes it easy for you all to see what I'm piping on since that plexi is clear, but you definitely don't need to buy something like this. I know there's a lot of different little practice boards out there, so if you already have one that these sheets can fit, go ahead and use that. If you don't, it's very easy to make something for you to practice on with stuff that you most likely already have on hand. So I've just used a 1/4 sheet cake board, a little bit of masking tape, it could be regular Scotch tape if you want, and I've affixed just, if I can get it up, a little sheet of parchment there. It makes it easy to take your pages, slide them under, fold that down, and then you have a nice semi-transparent surface that you can pipe on, and you can reuse those sheets. Let's practice our dots. I have my bag ready to go with my number 3 tip. I also have my number 5 and my number 12 right here next to me so I can change them out easily. If you haven't already grabbed those, go ahead and do that. We're going to start with our number 3 size dots, just right up here. And the thing we want to remember with dots is you need to be up off the surface, let that frosting expand out for you, stop, and then circle around. And this little sheet is going to give you a good guide to the size. So make sure you get yourself lined up right there in the center and go ahead and pipe each of those. And just try and get a nice, good size on each one. As you're going, make sure you're above the surface. When you finish, stop and circle around. If your dots are looking really smashed, you're probably too close. If you get a little uncontrolled line of frosting that wiggles around and doesn't attach, you're probably too far away. Adjust the height when you're lining yourself up. And as I practice, I like to talk to myself, give myself a nice little Goldilocks and the 3 bears kind of conversation where I say too close, too far away, too small, too big. And just keep going. Squeeze, circle around, shave off that top. We're looking to get nice little flat surfaces along our dots. We're trying to avoid the Hershey kiss or a little dimple on the top. And we're just trying to get a nice, even size as we go. And that's where having a little template will help you. I'm working a little further back from mine, so mine are probably just a little bit offset from my templates. But as you're working, make sure you pull your work close to you. The closer you are, the more stable it's going to be. Unfortunately for me, that's bad for filming. And just keep going. Go at your own pace. It doesn't have to be fast. Go as slow as you need to. The frosting, it's not going anywhere. Sometimes people get scared. They think if they go too slow, something bad is going to happen. It's not. You can just hang out there with the tip in place, and if you're not squeezing, it's not really doing anything. Just squeeze, stop, circle around, get a nice finish on all of them. You can see we're making lots of nice, tiny little number 3 size dots. It's really good practice. Anytime you need to adjust your bag, if your frosting starts to get warm and sloppy on you, dump it, remix it with some excess, and load it back up. If you need to, chill your frosting a little bit, re-whip it, and then reload it. We'll just keep going until we finish this line. Almost there, just a few more. Beautiful. We've changed tips to our number 5, and we're going to start on that section. And the thing to remember here is we're going to have to do a different height. We're very used now to where to put it for a number 3, so this is going to change things up a little bit for us, and we're going to have to adjust. So same thing, start straight up and down, touch that surface, pull up just enough so that your frosting connects, balloons out, gives you a nice, beautiful dot. Stop and circle around. And just like before, if you're too close, you're going to get more of a smashed flat disc. That means pull the tip up just a little bit. If you're too far away, you're going to get a line of frosting that doesn't connect and balloon out and instead wiggles around on you a little bit. And you'll find most likely that it's a little easier to make beautiful dots when they're bigger. Oh, you can see there, I was a little too far away. Didn't kind of connect. That happens sometimes when I'm talking. Don't worry about it. Just keep going. Even if you've got lots of experience, you're bound to get a little misfire every once in a while. It just happens. But taking some time to practice even your basic skills is a great way to help increase your speed, your accuracy, and also your precision. And just make sure to give yourself feedback as you're going. Talk yourself through the steps for each one until it becomes a nice little muscle memory. Line yourself up, squeeze, stop, circle around. And you'll notice that with bigger tip sizes, we end up doing less dots in the same area, and things will go just a little bit faster. Just want to make sure as we finish up this row, we do a nice job. Line ourselves up, squeeze, stop, circle around. Beautiful. Since we finished with our 5, we've switched to our number 12 tip and we're going to start on our final line. This one, the tip is even bigger, so you need to go even higher up. So make sure to adjust that height for yourself. Set yourself up in a good position. Make sure that bag is straight up and down. That way when you squeeze and hit that diameter, stop and circle around, you get a beautiful dot. If they're too flat or smashed, pull up a little bit. If your line of frosting doesn't connect and it wiggles around a bit on you, it feels uncontrolled, go a little closer and keep piping until you get the right feel. It should hit, balloon out nice and big for you, and then you stop and circle around. So once you figure out the height of your tip, go for a consistent diameter, and once you've finished that, work on smoothing off that top. And typically the key is just letting pressure off the bag. Sometimes when you start out, it's easier to just actually physically do it. Release your fingers and then make a nice little circular motion. Found over the years that a lot of people get scared, get a little nervous, a little anxiety, and it's like something about it makes you not want to stop squeezing. And that's the key to getting nice, beautiful dots. You really have to let your pressure up off the bag. So sometimes to begin with, it's actually good to actually just release your fingers a little bit. That way you know you're doing it. It's not tempting for those muscles to just kind of tighten up on you. And you'll get a beautiful finish to your dots. The other thing we do when we're nervous is speed up. And that's typically the enemy of precision. So make sure you go nice and slow. Gorgeous. And one more. Beautiful. We've finished our dot practice template. If you feel like you did a great job and you want to move on, go on to our next video. If you feel like maybe you still need some work in practice, you can scrape this off and give it another go. Now let's practice our stars. We're going to use tips 18, 21, and 199, so you want to get those ready. And we're starting with our number 18 on our bag. Right up here at that top left corner, I want to line myself up, get myself in the middle of that area, have my bag straight up and down, And I want to pull that tip up off the surface just a little bit. You want enough room that frosting connects, balloons out, gives us a nice full star. Stop squeezing and pull up. And that means you'll have a nice finish on the top there without a really tall peak. So no little Hershey kisses. We want just beautiful full stars. If you're too close when you're squeezing, you'll notice that they'll look flat. You may even have some voids in them, especially if those tines are touching. So as you go, make sure you adjust the height of your tip so that you're that perfect distance away. You'll see my frosting connects immediately and then balloons out. Make sure you release the pressure on your bag so you get a nice finish. And you want to do that as you hit that width on the template. So just think about first getting that bag straight up and down. That'll mean your frosting flows out evenly. And then adjusting the height so that you get nice full stars. And then watch your frosting. Let it go till you hit the nice little width on that template. Your points might not line up perfectly, and that's okay. You're just looking for that approximate size. And when you hit it, make sure you're releasing the pressure on the bag. And do that first before you pull that bag away. And that'll leave you with a nice finish on your stars. We want to make sure we hit our full width, but we don't want to squeeze so hard that they start to ruffle. We're just going to keep going. Slow and steady wins the race until we've piped all of our little beauties. Just keep going with each one and work on whatever part you need to. Try to think of each technique you do as a series of little steps and just work on mastering each step before you move on to the next one. Eventually you'll finish and you'll be doing a great job. And like all things, practice and repetition will be how you build muscle memory. And remember not to rush yourself. With piping, typically rushing is the enemy. So you just want to go nice, steady pace. Think about each part and squeeze nice little stars. And we're almost done with our 18. 2 more. And we'll move on. We've changed the tip on our bag to a 21, and we're going to start piping our next section. This is going to be just like the one before. You want to be straight up and down, squeeze and let it connect, stop, and then pull away. And you can see because we're a larger tip, we're going to get slightly larger stars. So when you're working, if you want to do some small stars, you'll use smaller tips. And when you want to make larger ones, select a larger tip. Don't just squeeze harder. Sometimes that might seem like the answer, but really it's picking the appropriate tool for the job. So it's important to practice our skills with a variety of sizes of tips so that we feel proficient and using all of them. And the main thing here is going to be adjusting because you're changing the height. So you want to be a little further up because you've got a larger tip. The frosting can balloon out just a little more to make a star before it would start to wrinkle because that opening is larger. So if you feel comfortable with the rest of the steps in the process of making stars, just work on the height with these. Work on adjusting how far away you are. If it's looking flat and smashed, make sure you pull up just a little bit. If it's looking too tall or too much like a little cone, go a little closer. And eventually, you'll be locked in. And we're just going to keep going until we finish all 3 rows. Just 2 more. Wonderful. And finally, we're going to do some stars with our number 199. So I've changed the tip on my bag, and I'm going to set myself up just like I did before. Straight up and down. I'm going to go a little higher than I did for my 21, since the opening on this one is even larger. And I'm going to squeeze a nice full star. I want to stop when it hits that beautiful full width. And before we start to get little wrinkles in our lines. Just want to make sure I'm releasing the pressure on my bag before I pull up. That way, we should get a nice finish to our star without a pronounced peak. And this should go just a little bit quicker since these are bigger and there's only 2 rows instead of 3. But they're good to practice because it means adjusting your height a little more and getting used to a different tip with a different opening. You'll see this one has a lot more tines on it, so our stars have a lot more points. And using the different styles of star tips is a great way to give yourself some natural variation in your designs. It helps to create interest and gives you a wider range of looks and styles. And a final one. Gorgeous. We finished our star practice sheet. If you feel comfortable with this skill, scrape it off and work on the next one. If you don't, you can just clean it off and redo it again. Rosettes. You can use any star tips you have to create them. Today, we're going to practice with 18, 21, and 32. We're starting with number 18 up here on this top section. And rosettes are a technique that build on your stars. So think about those stars that we practiced earlier. Squeeze a star, and instead of stopping, pull out to the side and imagine piping a circle right on the top edge of your star. Beautiful. We want to create that nice full star first. I like pulling over to the left, but you could pull to any point works for you. And you want to think of it a bit like a clock. So when I pull over, I imagine it's 9 o'clock, go up to noon, 3, down to 6, start tapering off my pressure. So when you're about 3/4 of a way around your circle, so that when you pull away, you're creating a nice little tapered tail. So think about just moving the bag right there, same level the entire time. You don't want to pull up or smash down because that'll dig into your frosting or leave a nice peak, which is what we're trying to avoid. We want to create a nice, soft, tapered little tail at the end for a perfect little look. And because we're piping on top of that star, these will have some height to them and some volume. So remember to just pipe your star first, move just a little bit to the outside edge while still piping, and swirl around. That star is acting like a base or a foundation for a beautiful rosette. And I feel most comfortable going clockwise, but some people like to go counterclockwise. So once you feel comfortable going clockwise, you can always try going the other direction. I find with rosettes, it doesn't really matter where you start your circle, just that you start it in a consistent place, at least for practicing. That allows you to really dial in that motion and make sure you're being consistent with it. When you're actually doing projects and working, you can always play with the direction you pull in to help create some interest in your designs. But for the sake of practicing, we like consistency. So just start your star, pull over to 9 o'clock, and make sure you're just releasing your pressure when we get to 6. That way, when you end up where you started, you've stopped squeezing. Beautiful. We've changed to our 21 tip, so let's give the second section a try. We're going to start right in the middle of our little image, squeeze that star, pull over to 9 o'clock, and circle around. For these, remember that you're going to go a little higher up to create your star to start with. So make sure, as you're piping your first few especially, that you're paying attention to how those stars look so you can adjust if they were either too flat or too high up. Once you feel like you've got that star at a good volume, start focusing on the motion of the rosette. Pulling over, circling around. Make that circle nice and smooth. Really think about hitting kind of like all the points on a clock face as you go around and making that nice circle motion with your hand. You'll notice when we go, we're keeping that bag straight up and down. So think about moving the whole bag as you go and not just the end. So it's not just the tip that's circling around, it's my whole hand that's circling. And it's a tiny motion. So just want to make sure that we all know that's what's happening. That way the bag stays straight up and down and your design looks beautiful. Once you've got that motion going, work on tapering off your pressure so you have that nice little tail on the end. When they come out perfectly, you have that beautiful little spiral that sweeps around and joins right back up with itself and forms what looks like an almost perfect little circle. It kind of reminds me of little shells, kind of twisting around on themselves. Gorgeous. We've changed the tip on our bag to number 32, and we're going to work on our last section. This one has an even larger opening than our 21, so we want to be at just a little bit higher. Same thing where we let our star build up nice and big. 9, 12, 3, and 6, and sweep off to that perfect little tapered point. As you work on your first few, really make sure you pay attention to your star. Make sure it's nice and full so you have a nice base to build that rosette on. And you can see we have kind of like a tight, closed rosette. It's really nice and compact, where you're not going too far out and you're really piping on that edge. So you get this beautiful little coil, and there's not too much of the center showing. So we're really piping completely on top of that star, spiraling around and getting a beautiful look. If you go too far out, you'll end up with a void. So if you feel like you're going much bigger than the pattern, probably a good idea to tighten it up. Gorgeous. Just like before, once you get the height of the star right, make sure you're really tracking around in a nice full circle. And when that feels comfortable, work on getting that beautiful tapered point. We're just going to keep going until we finish this last row. One final one to finish it off. Beautiful. As you can see, we finished our rosettes. Mine are looking gorgeous. If you feel like yours still needs some more work, you want to just clean your board off and give it another go until you feel comfortable before moving on. Shells. We're using tip number 21 to practice our shells. This is probably going to be the one you use most commonly, so we want to do a little bit of reinforcement with this skill. And with this tip size, it makes a great border for a lot of cakes, including birthday and celebration cakes. For our shells, we're holding our bag a little bit differently. You can see most of the techniques we've done so far, we were holding it straight up and down. This one is at a 45-degree angle, and I've got the back lined up with the technique. So think in the direction that I'm pulling. When you're working on actual cakes, that might change a little bit. And just remember to line that back end up with whichever direction you're going to pull your shells in. But always keep it at a 45-degree angle to the surface that you're piping on. We're going to start out with the tip touching just lightly, and you'll notice that I'm not right here at the front of where my little pattern is because the frosting is going to balloon out for us. So come back just a little bit, about a half an inch, not very much. Touch the surface lightly, lift up, and let that frosting roll over and then pull down and away. And you can see that gives us a nice rollover with that shell. We don't just want to pipe the whole thing. We're going to let the frosting do the work for us. So start out touching, squeeze while you've lifted up and let it roll over, and then pull down and away. And we're just kind of tapering off our pressure a little bit as we do that back end. And what's happening there is as we hold up off the surface and squeeze, the frosting has connected to the surface and that's allowed it to attach. So when we squeeze, it'll roll over on itself and balloon out a little bit. And that's going to give you that desired look for these shells, rather than if you just kind of squeeze and pipe and do the full motion without pausing there, you get what I call little inchworms. So just pull up, hold for a moment while it rolls over, and once it does, pull down and away. And that's going to give us a beautiful shell every time and a nice tapered look. So they're going to have the shape of little teardrops or petals and a beautiful ridge pattern. We're finished with our singles. We're going to now combine them together and work on building a border. If you're still having a little bit of trouble, you can always redo this section. Work on getting the single ones down before you move on to combining them into an actual border. Now we're going to combine our individual shells together to create a border. And what you want to think about here is not only each individual shell, but linking them together. So we want to start a little bit back from the end of that little tail and get our spacing nice and even so that we're just covering up the tip of the tail. And that's going to link these together to make a nice little chain. If you're too close, you'll lose the definition, the tapered shape of each shell. So you just want to make sure you give yourself enough space. And once you've mastered actually making the individual shells, this will become easy. It'll be just about how close you start to that tail, how far away. So make sure you're just paying attention as you go. You're getting nice spacing. And if you need to, adjust with the next one. If the one before was a little too close and you lose that tapered shape, pull back just a little more. If you got a little too far away and they're looking too spaced out and uneven, go just a little bit closer. Just keep talking to yourself and adjusting until you get a nice, even, consistent look with your shells, not only in their size and shape, but in how close together they are. Once we're finished with our first row, we'll just work on the next. And for something like shell borders, where the individual look of each one becomes important because we want a consistent size and shape, I always try to find a rhythm. So think about things like counting time if you're doing something like dancing, and make a nice little rhythm to your movements. And that rhythm will help you time your squeezes. So 1 and 2, 1 and 2, squeeze for 1, sweep on 2. It'll help give you a nice, even, consistent look. often talk to myself when I'm doing little piping like that, just so I can get a nice, lovely, consistent look to the size and shape of all of these. I've finished my shell practice sheet. If you feel comfortable with this, go ahead and move on. If you don't, give it another go. Keep going until you feel like you've really got a consistent size and shape, and then move on to your next technique, or just come back to this later. Reverse shells. We're going to use a 21 tip for this technique also, just because it's going to be the most commonly used size for a border. It's just that nice size and shape and weight that looks great with a lot of designs and a lot of different sizes of cakes. So it's a great one to know how to do. We're going to practice our shells both directions first before we move on and combine them to a border. So we want to practice doing it clockwise and also counterclockwise. And this is going to build on our shells. So you think 45 degrees is how we're holding the bag. Back end is going to be in the direction that we're pulling. We're going to start out touching. We're going to squeeze and circle around. So think a bit about combining two techniques we've already learned, a shell and a rosette. So think about lifting up, drawing part of a circle right around there at the top, so a little curve. And then we're going to pull down, kind of relax our pressure a little bit as we pull to a tapered point. So here we're going clockwise for a row. And if you need to, if it doesn't quite feel comfortable yet, you can always scrape that off and do it over again. And then we're going to go counterclockwise. So you notice the pattern goes the other direction. Up, around, and down. So start, lift up, circle around, and then pull to a point. Now we're going to combine the two directions of spiraling shells to create a border. So think going clockwise for one, counterclockwise for the next. And just like our shells, we want to pay attention and make sure that all we're covering up is just the end. So we want to see the direction and the movement of each of those shells. And we just want to cover up the end of that little tapered point with the next. So really want to make sure that we pull a nice little tapered point so we have just that little nice fine end to cover up. And just like our shells, we want to work on how closely together we space them. So if you got a little too close with some, pull back a little further to start your next shell. And work on changing up that motion so it becomes natural to switch directions. They get a little too far apart, move just a little bit closer. And these look beautiful to finish off the borders and top edges of cakes. Gives it just a little flair with that spiral, makes it look just a little bit fancy. It's great for cake designs where you want kind of a nice ocean feel. Has a little bit of that motion of waves, sea foam. This is a great one to have for a variety of occasions. Wonderful. There's our finished reverse shell sheet. I'm feeling great about mine, so I'm going to move on. If you need to give it another go, scrape it off and practice it again. If you think this is something you want to come back to and practice more later, make a little note for yourself about what you want to work on. Now we're going to work on our lines. For this, we're going to use our number 3. It's probably one of the easier tips to start with for lines, as it's not too small and it's not too big. So it's kind of in that nice little Goldilocks zone for us. And there's a few things we want to think about when we're making lines. We're piping right now as if we're piping on the top surface of the cake, because that's the easiest place to start. So if you're watching these videos, you're probably at the beginning of your cake decorating journey, and you want to start doing lines right on that top surface of the cake. Trying to do them on the side is going to be a little more difficult. And what we're going to do is use gravity to give us beautiful straight lines. So we want to start bag straight up and down, touching the surface, and just lift up a tiny bit while you squeeze and move. Touch down when you want to end, stop squeezing, and pull away. And that's going to give us a nice, beautiful line. It'll be beautiful, straight, have its full kind of height and width, and be nice and even. Just move nice and slow. And there's a few things to look out for. We want to do nice starts and finishes. So once you get your rate going, that's going to be based on how hard you squeeze. So think if you move too fast, you're going to get a bubble or a pop or a tear in the middle of that line. And if you move too slow, it's going to wiggle or kind of bulge out on you. So those are indications that you need to change the rate that you're moving at. So if you get a nice, beautiful line, it's straight, no little kind of pops or tears in there, you know you're moving at a good speed. Once you do that, try working on the beginning and ends. We want a nice little start, nice and clean, and we do that by touching the surface and just starting to squeeze as we start to move. And it can be a little tough, especially to begin with, to work that out. But as you go and practice more, it'll get easier and easier. And you'll know you might be squeezing a little too much if you get a big kind of bulb at the beginning. Or if you're not touching the surface, you might get a bit of an uncontrolled line where it's not completely attached and you're not quite in control of where it's going. Then work on your finishes. If you're not touching down and stopping your pressure on the bag, so make sure you let up pressure on the bag when you want to finish, you're going to find that you end up with little tails on the end of your lines. So those are things to look out for. And you'll notice we moved vertically first and then horizontally, and we're changing it up as we go. It's not important just to practice lines, but to practice pulling them in all directions. That way, we get used to different movements with our arms and our hands and coordinating everything together. And we'll feel really confident about it before we go to work on our cakes. So in between sections, take a moment to adjust. You notice I often retwist and tighten my bag. That just helps to keep a little bit of pressure on the frosting. Makes it a little easier to squeeze. You have to use less pressure with your hands if the bag is doing some of the work for you. Oh, and there we got an air bubble. Those happen. Don't worry about it. Just meet back up and keep going. With buttercream, air bubbles are just going to be something that happen occasionally. Those are going to be one of those things like your bag rate and your pressure that you just can't control. I've finished my vertical and horizontal section. I'm going to move on to some diagonals. Now we're going to practice some diagonals. So we're just going to practice really moving in that diagonal motion. We're going to do the same technique where we're doing our lines straight up and down with the bag, lifting up and letting that frosting drop into place for us. And really, the trickiest thing is having the confidence to finish the line. So when we get to the end, just touching the surface before we stop squeezing and then pull the tip away. Once we go one direction, we're going to go the other. So we're looking to just kind of build up our confidence by making some straight lines in different directions. Keep going. Slow and steady wins the race. And you can see gives us a nice, beautiful, clean result. Wonderful. Now we're going to practice some wavy lines. We've been doing straight ones up until now, so we want to practice some nice little soft curves. This is going to be a little easier if you pull up just a little higher. So you'll notice I'm just a little further away from the surface than I was before. And this makes it easier to control that curve and get that frosting to do what we want. So once you feel confident with those beautiful straight lines, we'll practice some little curving ones and get some nice little soft waves with these. And we're going to go one direction first and then go the other. And lines are important. They allow us to do a lot of different things on our cakes, but they also form the basis for things like scroll work, a lot of different piped details, and especially writing, whether you want to do it in print or in cursive. So it's important not only to practice straight motions, but curving and arcing ones as well. That way, our hands are used to it and we go to work on our cakes. We always want to practice moving in all directions so that when we go to work on our actual projects, our movements feel nice, natural, and practiced. And sometimes when we do little work like this, it's easy to wonder, what would I use this for? But they'll be the basis of outlining things like circles, squares, ovals, unusual shapes, and freeform objects. And they'll be great for making things like stars and other details that can be done with just a few quick lines. And doing these little pieces and parts will help build up your confidence in your motions. We finished our line template. If you're feeling confident, you can move on. If you want to stay here, you can wipe it off and practice again. If you think I need to practice this again later, make a little note to yourself about what you want to work on. But I'm feeling really great about this, and I'm going to go ahead and move to my next sheet. Bows. We're going to be using tip number 104, and this one is a quick little technique that's pretty easy to learn, and it's a great way to finish off some designs. So we thought we'd make sure we show this to you since it's an easy one for beginners to master. We're going to start by working on the loops and then the tails and then combining them all together. For those loops, you'll notice I've got my bag. It's not quite straight up and down. You just want to rock it towards yourself a tiny bit. I'm going to be touching the surface with the fat end of my petal tip, and the skinny end is going to be up off the surface just a little bit. And I'm just going to follow my little loop. So start here in the middle, on the back side, pull out, loop around, and back towards the front. So you can see it joins itself together. It looks like one half of a little loop, like you've tied your shoelaces, and it's got just a little bit of height and dimension to it, so it's not completely flat on the surface. Let's practice that left side loop again. Beautiful. Now let's do the right side and just kind of warm ourselves up, kind of build up that muscle memory so that it feels comfortable. Start in the middle, draw the back, loop around, and meet up where you started. So we just want to touch the surface and then move as we start squeezing, loop around, stop, and pull away. The tails are going to be very simple. They're a lot like lines. We're going to hold our bag the same way. And I like pulling from the outside to the center, but try going from the center to the outside as well. You might find one way more comfortable than the other. And I'm going to set my bag up just the way I did before and pull up in a nice little curved motion. And once we are done practicing the left side, we'll practice the right. Now we're going to make an actual bow by combining all those parts. And I'm going to do the first part, the loops, just as one motion. So think about drawing a figure eight or an infinity sign on its side. And I'm going to start here in the middle and do my left side first. It's a little easier since I'm right-handed. Back and around. And just stop where you meet up. Now I'm going to draw the little tails. Adorable. We've got one done. Let's practice our other two. These little bows make a cute, simple way to finish off your cakes. And it's a simple way to turn them into adorable little presents or turn flower arrangements into little bouquets. So it's a nice, simple technique if you're just starting your cake decorating journey. We've finished practicing our bows. If you still feel like you need a little bit of work or some parts are a little shaky, scrape it off and give it a try again, or make yourself a little note on what you want to work on in a future practice session. Next, we're going to make some ribbon swags. We're using our 104 tip for this as well, so it's our nice little plain petal tip. We're going to use it in a slightly different fashion. And so we're going to be touching the surface with the fat end, and you want that skinny end kind of free off the surface a little bit. We're going to hold the bag at a 45-degree angle, and I'm going to start over here. So the fat end is facing up, kind of away from us. If we're doing this, say, on the side of the cake, it would be pointing towards the top of the cake, right? And we are going to just squeeze and slide up. As you start to slide up and make that little point, think about relaxing your pressure on the bag. This will give you a tiny bit of a taper on that end. Then we'll just start the next one. Beautiful. And this is a great way to make some simple, sweet, clean looking little swags if you're making a nice little celebration cake. Right on the side of your cake, maybe on the bottom to finish off as a border. And you can see it very quickly comes together just by doing that same little curved motion. You just want to practice that flow, practice that nice little soft curve. Once you start linking them together, you get a beautiful little border to trim the top or bottom edge of your cake. Let's practice that a second time. So just think about letting off that pressure gently as you end each of those swags. We did a plain ribbon swag. Now we're going to do a ruffled one. So we want to think about this as the overall motion is that same gentle little curve, so sweeping down. We just want to wriggle as we go. So we're going to set up the exact same way. So I've got my bag at 45 degrees. The fat end is the one making contact with the surface, and the skinny end is just kind of naturally up off it. And I'm just going to ruffle as I go. So just think about making a nice little curved motion. So think about tiny little bumps as you follow along. And just kind of gently taper off your pressure a little bit at the end, and that'll give you a nice little soft peak. But you can see you can stack them together and quickly make a little ruffled border as well. And as you need to, make sure you adjust your position on your bag just to make sure you have good pressure on the frosting. But you can see we very simply created two unique little borders, great ways to finish our cakes, especially if you're doing birthday or other celebration cakes. You want to make something that looks festive and like it fits in with the party. These are great little details to add to your designs. If you feel comfortable, move on. If you don't, scrape it off and give it another try. Or just make yourself a note about what you want to work on next time. Now we're going to use one of the tips that you may not have tried before. It's a number 86 and it's a combination. It's going to give you a shell on top and a ruffle on the bottom. So it's kind of the work of two tips and two passes on a cake in one motion. So it's a nice one to know how to use. And we're going to use it to do a straight ruffle combo and a swagged one. So we're going to start over here, and just like you would with our shell, we're going to be at 45 degrees. Back into the bag is pointing in the direction that we're piping. And the important part is that elongated portion of the tip is kind of off the surface. That's what's going to create the ruffle. So we're just touching with the points of the stars. So we just want to come and do exactly like we do when we're creating a shell. So just up, squeeze, let it fold over, and go. And anytime you need to, make sure you're pushing your frosting down, giving your bag a twist. These ones, if you've pulled it to a nice little point, it's easy, just like a shell, to pick up right where you left off and begin again. So think about drawing out the end and letting that frosting roll over just to cover it up a little bit. If the end of one of your little tails gets a little messy, you can always just adjust it a little bit before you get started. Sometimes I use the tip just to press it down a tiny bit. But you can see this is a great way to make a quick work of making a border. Let's practice it a second time. So we're just moving up, giving it a pause while we squeeze, letting it roll over before we pull to the side and make contact with the surface. And the longer you hold, the larger your ruffle and your shell will be. So you can even play with the size just a little bit. Beautiful. Now that we've done our straight combination shell and ruffle border, we're going to try a swagged version. So think the same motion. The big change here is the back of the bag is going to rotate a little bit as we move along our shell border. So you want to make sure you're just comfortable with kind of changing your position a little bit. Before we were just working in a nice straight line, and here we're going to kind of go with that curve. So you want to make sure that you're set up for success. We're going to start 45-degree angle. Only the part of the tip that's making that star is going to touch. And we're just going to make our little border. And as we go along, we're just going to gently move the back end of the bag a tiny bit each time. So think about piping one, moving just a tiny bit, and then piping the next one. Gorgeous. You can see now we get that nice little arc to that ruffle, and it can take a little bit of getting used to. Don't worry too much. In between little ruffled shells that you pipe, you can just take a moment, adjust the bag before you pipe the next one. You don't have to go all in one motion. It doesn't have to be continuous squeezing. So stop, take a moment, set yourself up. If the tail end of the one there is kind of in the way, just use the tip to gently remove a little bit of frosting and start the next one. So you can see every time I go, just move a tiny touch. Adjust just a little bit. And follow along on that curve. Gorgeous. And we'll set up to do our last little swag on this row. So doing them as swags just kind of builds on what we did before as our straight ruffle, where the only thing you really have to get used to is repositioning after each squeeze. We've done it once, so let's practice it a second time. And as you go, it should be easier to reposition your hand and adjust as needed. Like anything, it just takes a little bit of practice. And here we have our templates as a nice, easy little guide for us. If you're doing this on the side of the cake, you can just take a moment before you get started and trace your little swags on the side of your cake with something little like a toothpick. And that'll help you make nice, even, beautiful swags, just like we did here on our practice sheet. We're finished with our combination shells and ruffles. They went really well for us, so we're going to go ahead and move on to our next technique. If you felt like they were taking a little getting used to and you want some more practice, take a moment and stop and do them over again. Or if you're going to practice these at a later time, make a note to yourself about what you want to work on. Now we're going to do something fun with our 2D tip. And this one is a really useful one. It comes in a lot of kits and it's what's called a closed star tip or a drop flower tip. So you can see those points come together there in the middle, and that's going to allow us to create flowers just with a single squeeze. And we're going to use this to create 3 types of flowers, and they kind of build on each other a little bit. And you'll get a little more comfortable if you practice the first one first. It gives you a little handle on the bag and how to use the tip. So we're going to start straight up and down. I'm going to put just a little bit of pressure on the bag because we're going to gently touch the surface with the center of that tip. So think where all those points on that star come together. We're just going to lightly touch the surface and squeeze. And you can see I'm going to stop before it starts ruffling and wrinkling, let my pressure off the bag, and just lift straight up. And that leaves me just a tiny void in the center. So let's go ahead and make all of our little flowers. I probably won't line up perfectly with my template because that would mean lining up your openings perfectly, which probably won't happen, but I'll try to make sure that it does. We just want to go ahead with the general size. If you try to go too much bigger than this, it's going to start to wrinkle and ruffle. And our goal here is to make little flowers with straight petals. And as you can imagine, it would be very easy to do these directly on your cakes and cupcakes. Because all you have to do is lightly touch the surface with the tip, squeeze to get those nice little straight lines coming out, and then go back with our number 3. So that's the other tip that we're using here. I'm of course using the same color because we're just practicing today, but use a different color and that'll give you a nice little center there. And we're just going to go directly in the middle where that void is and squeeze a nice little dot. And since we practiced dots before, it's nice and easy. It's a familiar technique. This also creates a little challenge because we're doing our little dots right here in the middle, right in that void. To finish them off. But this is an easy tip to use, the 2D, to create flowers really quickly because just a simple squeeze all over your cake in a couple of different colors can create a lot of variety very quickly, and you can just finish them off easily with that number 3 tip. Now we're going to use our same 2D tip our same drop flower tip to create some ruffled flowers. And on this one, we're going to set ourselves up the same. We're going to do lightly touching the surface with the points of this tip. We're going to squeeze, but instead of stopping when we hit a nice little size, we're going to keep going. And you can see that's going to create fuller petals that ruffle for us and give us a nice fuller look that also is just a little bit different because they're going to have that tiny little wriggle to them. So we'll just keep going and practice these. And when we're done, we'll finish the centers with our number 3 tip. There we go. You can see it's naturally just going to wrinkle on you if you continue to squeeze. So you don't really need to do anything different. Just nice, steady pressure as you squeeze. And when you reach your desired size, just stop squeezing and then gently pull straight up. And these are easy to finish with a little simple dot in the middle as well. Now we're going to use our drop flower tip to create flowers that actually look like petals you've piped with, say, your 104 tip. And these are simple, easy flowers to do. We're just going to take our hand position and rotate it. So my normal relaxed position when I'm piping is like this. And I'm just going to rotate my hand. Think of it like a fist. So it's kind of like it's almost curving down, or in this case, in towards myself. I'm going to touch the surface like I did before, and all I'm going to do is move my hand so it's back in that relaxed position. So just rotating it back to its natural position as I squeeze. And this is one of those things you can't do slowly. You just have to start squeezing and let your wrist go back to its original position all in one motion. So it's going to take a little bit of practice, and if the first few are funky, that's perfectly fine. So just start with your wrist curled, touch the surface, and squeeze and twist at the same time. Once you've got nice full petals, you stop and pull up. So you can see it gives us that nice ballooning out because we're doing that twist as we squeeze. So just start in that kind of curled, coiled up, unnatural position and squeeze as you return to your relaxed position. The harder you squeeze, the larger your petals will be. And that initial position might be a little uncomfortable at first. That's kind of normal. It's a little bit of like a stressed position. So just know you start turning and squeezing, and when you return to that regular position, that's when you stop. So the timing on these can take a little bit to get used to, but once you do, it's going to be easy to create beautiful flowers quickly that look like they took way more work than they actually did. It's just a simple twist of your wrist and then a dot to finish them. And all of these styles can be piped directly on your creations. So it's an easy way to introduce yourself to making flowers without having to use your flower nail. And you can get 3 easy styles out of 1 tip. That's all for our lesson on our drop flowers using our 2D tip. If you feel like you've really got it after our little practice session, you can go ahead and move on. If not, give it another go or make a note of what you want to work on next time. Thanks for watching this Practice With Me series video. If you'd like to consider supporting our school, click the link for more information on the Basic Piping Techniques set. You get 10 printable templates to help guide your practice and help you follow along with this video. Even if you don't, we appreciate you just watching. And remember to keep practicing your skills. They're going to help you improve and make more progress on your cake decorating journey. And if you enjoyed this practice section, consider checking out one of our Masterclass series cake videos. If you enjoyed this video and you'd like more about the cake decorating materials and equipment we use, or just some inspirational videos about cake decorating itself, you can follow us on Insta or YouTube at Cake Decorating School. If you'd like to know more about yearly membership and what it entails, you can go to www.cakedecoratingschool.com for more information. And if you're interested in these products, you can check the links in the description.